You know, there's something almost supernatural about the first time you pull the trigger on a plasma torch. 1 second, you're looking at a slab of cold, stubborn half-inch steel, and the next, you're literally wielding a bolt of lightning that's twice as hot as the surface of the sun. It makes a hacksaw feel like a butter knife from a dollhouse.
It's definitely physics' way of letting us pretend we're wizards. But let's be honest, Tiger. Whenever I see a beginner pick one up, it usually looks less like wizardry and more like a tactical glitter explosion. Sparks everywhere, jagged edges, and that smell of ozone and regret.
Ozone and regret. Yeah, I've inhaled my fair share of that cocktail. I remember the first time I tried to freehand a circle for a fire pit. I was moving so jerky and slow that by the time I finished, the metal looked like it had been chewed on by a very angry beaver with steel teeth. I ended up with about 4 pounds of dross, that's the slag for the uninitiated, welded so hard to the back of the plate, I had to use a cold chisel and a prayer to get it off.
And that's why we're doing this deep dive today, because as cool as lightning in a box is, it's remarkably easy to do a terrible job with it. We're breaking down how to actually get those laser crisp edges without turning your shop into a 4th of July accident. Before we get to the how-to, we have to do the don't die part. I noticed you didn't just reach for your standard sunglasses when we were testing this earlier.
Definitely not. A plasma arc is essentially a high frequency scream of light. If you try to watch that with just your naked eyes or some cheap gas welding goggles, you're going to be seeing purple spots until the next leap year. At 30 amps, you need a shade 5 at the absolute minimum. If you're cranking it up for the thick stuff, you need to go darker. And please, for the love of all things holy, wear a respirator or at least open every door in the zip code. You're literally vaporizing metal. That's not a scent of success. That's a trip to the lung doctor.
I feel like I repeat this every week, but if it's bright or it smokes, it's trying to kill you. Okay, let's talk setup. You've got the machine, you've got the power. What's the one thing people miss before they even start?
Air. It's always the air. A plasma cutter is really just a fancy air handler. If your air is wet, and trust me, if you live anywhere with humidity, it's wet, your consumables are going to toast themselves in minutes. Most folks plug it into a generic shop compressor and wonder why their electrodes look like they've been through a war zone after 5 minutes of cutting. You need a dedicated moisture trap. If water hits that arc, it turns into a jagged, sputtering mess.
Right, because the air isn't just the fuel, it's the blast that clears the molten metal out of the way. If it's not clean, the physics just fall apart. Now, I saw you doing something interesting with the ground clamp. You moved it 3 times before you were happy.
Yeah, because I've made the mistake of clamping onto the part that's about to fall on the floor. There's nothing quite like finishing a perfect cut, only to have your ground lead yanked off the table by a 20-pound slab of falling steel. You want your work lead on the main stays put part of the plate, and scrape the paint off first. If you have a lousy connection, the arc is going to wander like a lost tourist.
Okay, let's get into the actual technique. You taught me the drag versus standoff thing, but walk us through a perfect edge start.
Most beginners want to start right in the middle because it feels safer. But starting on the edge is like a gift to your machine. I position the torch vertically, just a hair off the metal. When I pull the trigger and that arc fires, I wait. That's the hardest part, waiting half a heartbeat until I see the sparks shooting under the plate. If the sparks are blowing back up at your face, you haven't pierced through yet. If you move too soon, you're just carving a shallow trench in the surface.
And that's when the sparks go everywhere and you panic.
Exactly. Once it's through, you find your rhythm. Think of it like a steady walk. If you go too fast, the arc can't melt the metal fast enough, and the cut tails out at an angle. If you go too slow, you're essentially heat soaking the whole plate and creating a mountain of dross.
You always say you can read the sparks. What does that actually look like?
It's a secret language, Alex. If the sparks are trailing out the bottom at about a 15 to 20 degree angle behind your movement, you're in the sweet spot. That's the Goldilocks zone. If they're shooting straight down, you might be going a bit slow. If they're lagging way behind, your machine is struggling to keep up with your hand.
That's great for a straight line, but whenever I try to follow a chalk line, my hand shakes. It's like I suddenly forget how to move my arm.
We all have the plasma jitters when we start. My trick? Don't try to be a surgeon with a free hand. I use a piece of 1/4 inch flat bar as a guide. But, and this is a big but, you have to account for the offset. The nozzle of the torch has a certain thickness. If you want your cut exactly at 5 inches, your guide bar needs to be positioned maybe 1/8 of an inch back, depending on your torch. I've ruined many a project because I forgot that the center of the arc isn't the edge of the nozzle.
I remember that. You were making those brackets for the truck rack, and they were all exactly a quarter inch too narrow. You looked like you wanted to throw the whole torch into the woods.
I was definitely having a moment with the universe that day. I had to weld on extensions, which is basically a walk of shame in the welding world, but that's how you learn. Now, I have a little wooden spacer I use to set my fences.
What about when you can't start from the edge, like cutting a hole in the middle of a panel? That's where I always see people blow their tips out.
The center start is where the consumables go to die if you aren't careful. If you hold the torch perfectly vertical and pull the trigger, all that molten metal has nowhere to go but straight back up into your expensive copper tip. It's like spitting into a gale force wind.
So what's the move? The tiger tilt?
Let's not name it after me. I don't want the liability. I tilt the torch at about a 45-degree angle. When the arc fires, it blasts the molten pre-metal away from the torch. As it eats its way through, I slowly rotate the torch back to vertical. It's a rolling motion. Once the hole is clear, then you start your travel. It saves your nozzle and keeps the top side of the metal much cleaner.
It's also about current. I see people just crank the dial to max regardless of what they're cutting. I'm guessing that's a rookie move?
It's the loud pipes, save lives philosophy applied to metal, and it's just as wrong here. If you're cutting thin 20-gauge sheet metal with 50 amps, you're basically trying to perform surgery with a chainsaw. You'll just vaporize the edge before you can even move the torch. Match your amperage to your thickness. Most machines have a chart on the inside of the door or in the manual. Read it. It's the only time I'll tell you to read the instructions.
I'll mark the calendar. Tiger recommends the manual. But actually, that brings up a good point about travel speed. If I'm at the right amperage, how do I know if I'm moving at the right speed without looking at the sparks underneath? Because sometimes you can't see under the table.
Listen to it. A good plasma cut sounds like a steady, high-pitched hiss, almost like a piece of silk ripping. If it sounds like it's stuttering or gurgling, you're either too far away or moving way too slow. And at the very end of the cut, here's a pro tip. When you're about to reach the far edge, tilt the torch handle forward slightly. It helps the arc exit the bottom of the metal first, so you don't end up with that annoying little tab of metal holding the piece on.
Okay, let's talk about the cheap machines. Every time we post a video, someone asks, can I do this with the $300 Amazon special, or do I need the $2,000 pro-grade rig?
That's the $1,000,000 question. Well, the $300 question. Look, those budget machines have come a long way. For a hobbyist cutting brackets or doing some yard art, they're fantastic. But there's a trade-off. Their duty cycle is usually pretty short. You cut for 2 minutes, and the machine needs a 5-minute nap to cool down. And their consumables, the tips and electrodes, often aren't standard. You might find a great deal on the machine and then spend a fortune trying to find parts that fit.
Plus, the cut quality on the thick stuff usually suffers.
Right, on 1/8 inch, you won't see much difference, but try to cut 1/2 inch plate with a bargain bin machine, and it'll look like it was cut with a very determined moth. The high-end machines have much better pilot arcs. That's the feature that lets the torch stay lit, even when you're cutting over rusty metal or expanded metal grates.
Wait, expanded metal? Like the mesh stuff? I thought you had to have a special setting for that.
You do on most older machines. If you try to cut mesh with a standard setting, the arc will extinguish every time it hits a hole. Modern pro machines have a continuous pilot arc mode. It keeps the torch firing even in the gaps. If you're doing a lot of trailer floors or security screens, that feature alone is worth the extra few $100.
We've covered a lot. Setup, air quality, edge starts, the tilt for piercing, and travel speed. If you had to pick one thing that changed your plasma game the most, what was it?
Honestly, it was realizing that I'm not a machine. For the longest time, I tried to move the torch with just my wrist. Now, I use my whole body. I'll do a dry run first. I'll move the torch along the line without pulling the trigger to make sure my arm isn't going to hit a clamp or get snagged on a cable halfway through. If your body's uncomfortable, your cut will be ugly.
It's like golf. The swing starts before you hit the ball.
Exactly. Plant your feet, check your hose clearance, and take a breath. It's funny. We use this incredibly violent, high-energy tool to find a moment of real stillness and focus when it's going right and the sparks are flowing and the metal is just falling away. Man, there's nothing like it.
Just don't forget the respirator, unless you want your inner stillness to include a cough that sounds like a gravel crusher.
Fair point. My takeaway for the folks at home, don't be afraid to burn some practice metal. Take some scraps, mess with the settings, go too fast on purpose, then go too slow. Seeing what a bad cut looks like is the only way you'll ever recognize a perfect one.
Well said. This has been the deep dive on plasma cutting. Go make some sparks, safely.
And remember, if the sparks are hitting your boots, move your feet. I've gone through enough laces to know better.